In 1979, the galaxy wasn't just on movie screens, it was invading television sets across America. Sci-fi was the hottest genre in entertainment. Star Wars had taken the world by storm. Star Trek was experiencing a rebirth. And Universal Pictures decided to gamble on reviving a pulp hero most people hadn't thought about in decades. Buck Rogers in the 25th century. What followed was one of the most dazzling, confusing, and downright weird shows ever produced. A blend of disco fashion, recycled props, glittering spandex, and clunky robot sidekicks, Buck Rogers became a cult classic, even though it only lasted 2 seasons. But behind its shiny futuristic facade lies a world of bizarre behind-the-scenes stories that only make the series more fascinating. So strap yourself into your starfighter, because today we're looking at 15 weird facts about Buck Rogers in the 25th century you never knew. Weird facts about Buck Rogers in the 25th century. 1. It started as a movie, not a show. Believe it or not, the 1979 pilot wasn't made for TV. Universal executives released it in theaters to test the waters. Nobody expected much, but audiences showed up in droves. The film made money, and suddenly NBC rushed to reformat it into a weekly series. Few shows in history have had this strange path from cinema to primetime television. Buck Rogers is older than Superman. Buck first appeared in 1928 in a pulp magazine called Amazing Stories. That means he predates Superman, Batman, and most of the superheroes we know today. By the time Gil Gerard stepped into the role on television, Buck Rogers was already a cultural relic being reborn for the disco age. Twicky's voice was legendary. The tiny robot Twicky became the show's mascot with his catchphrase, "Biddy, biddy, biddy." But here's the kicker. He was voiced by none other than Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and most of the Looney Tunes cast. Imagine one of the greatest voice actors of all time lending his talent to a pint-sized robot sidekick. Buck Rogers killed Battlestar Galactica. Both shows were created by Glenn A. Larson, but running 2 expensive sci-fi series was draining Universal's budget. To cut costs, they killed Galactica and funneled its props, costumes, and even special effects into Buck Rogers. In fact, many Galactica fans still blame Buck for their show's premature cancellation. Wilma Deering's costume was scandalous. Erin Gray's iconic uniform as Colonel Wilma. Deering left almost nothing to the imagination. Tight, gleaming spandex with plunging necklines. It looked more like something from Studio 54 than outer space. Gray later revealed how uncomfortable it was and how the producers intentionally leaned into the disco-era style to grab attention. The man inside Twicky. Twicky wasn't CGI, he was played by stuntman Felix Silla, who also portrayed Cousin It on The Addams Family. But the costume was heavy, hot, and physically exhausting. Silla eventually walked away from the role, leaving Twicky voiceless for a short while until producers begged him to return. A hidden political agenda. The Earth Defense Directorate wasn't just a generic futuristic government. It was designed to mirror the United Nations, with the writers sneaking in messages about diplomacy, peace, and global unity. The problem? Most viewers were too distracted by ray guns, glittering costumes, and Twicky's sass to notice the subtext. Gil Gerard versus the scripts. Gil Gerard, the man playing Buck, hated the way his character was written. He thought the scripts were juvenile and campy, and he wasn't shy about saying so. On set, he sometimes rewrote dialogue himself, clashing constantly with producers. This battle behind the scenes gave Buck Rogers a reputation as one of the most difficult shows to manage. A villain replaced overnight. In the theatrical pilot, the villain Kane was played by Henry Silva. But when the series began, Silva was gone, replaced by Michael and Sarah. Fans were never given an explanation, and the show acted as if nothing had changed. Borrowed from Star Wars and Galactica. The show's spaceships, blasters, and even sound effects were recycled. Models were kit-bashed from Battlestar Galactica, while sound designers lifted audio cues straight from Star Wars. In fact, watch closely and you'll notice some shots that look suspiciously familiar if you've seen George Lucas's epic 11, predicting the internet. In one episode, Buck casually pulls up an interactive database that delivers instant information, basically an early version of the internet. At the time, this seemed like wild fantasy. Decades later, it feels strangely prophetic. Erin Gray became a sci-fi icon. Despite the awkward costumes, Erin Gray's Colonel Wilma Deering became a breakthrough role for women in sci-fi. She wasn't just eye candy. She was a commander, pilot, and leader. Many fans wrote letters saying she inspired them to join the military or study space science. Season 2's strange turn. NBC panicked after ratings dipped and decided to reinvent the show in Season 2. Suddenly, Buck was on a starship called the Searcher, roaming deep space in stories that looked suspiciously like Star Trek. Fans hated the drastic change. The campy fun of Season 1 was gone, replaced by pseudo-philosophical space wandering. A legal battle in the background. The original creators' estate wasn't happy. They sued Universal, claiming the studio had exploited Buck Rogers without proper rights or royalties. The case dragged through courts for years, clouding the show's legacy even further. Buck Rogers refuses to die. Even though it ended in 1981, Hollywood has tried multiple times to revive the franchise. At one point, Frank Miller, Sin City 300, was attached to a reboot. More recently, streaming platforms have whispered about giving Buck another chance. It seems this 1920s pulp hero just won't stay buried. Outro at its best, Buck Rogers in the 25th century was colorful, campy, and wildly entertaining. At its worst, it was a recycled, clunky patchwork of disco fashion and leftover props, but it holds a unique place in TV history. It bridged the gap between old pulp adventure and modern sci-fi fandom. It gave us Twiki's unforgettable voice, Erin Gray's trailblazing commander, and Gil Gerard's reluctant space hero. More than 4 decades later, people still remember the sparkling uniforms, the odd dialogue, and the unforgettable catchphrases. It wasn't high art, but it didn't need to be. Buck Rogers captured a moment in time when television was trying desperately to match the spectacle of Star Wars. And maybe that's why it endures. Because for all its weirdness, all its recycled effects and disco-era glitter, Buck Rogers in the 25th century reminded us of something timeless. In every century, humanity is still looking to the stars.